Every Oscar season, you can guarantee at least one of the films nominated for Best Picture is going to be a movie about overcoming racism. While this is by no means a bad thing, there's no denying that racism messages have become a common trait of Oscar bait. Films nominated in the past few decades have included, among others, Crash, Green Book, The Help, 12 Years a Slave, The Blind Side, and Get Out.
One of these things is not like the others.
Get Out differs from the others for a few reasons, but let's discuss the big one. It's a horror movie. For those who aren't aware, horror, much like sci-fi and fantasy, is one of the few genres that rarely sees any respect from the Academy Awards. As we all know, the Oscars always give more clout to the super serious realistic movies, and anything fantastical will often get overlooked as a result. But in spite of being a horror movie that certainly wouldn't be considered traditional Oscar bait, I honestly think the anti-racism message of Get Out is not only effective, but it's one of the best I've ever seen from a movie. The film begins with a young black man named Andre walking home alone at night when a car starts following him and the driver attacks and kidnaps him. We are then introduced to our main protagonist Chris, an up-and-coming photographer, and his girlfriend Rose Armitage. Rose has invited Chris to meet her parents, and Chris is feeling somewhat anxious, not only because he's meeting his girlfriend's parents for the first time, but because he's worried her parents, a rich white couple, might not be so welcoming towards a black man dating their daughter. Upon arriving at their estate, Chris finds the Armitages to be pleasant enough, though they seem a little bit eager to prove just how unracist they are, with comments about voting for Obama and admiring Jesse Owens. Though it is a little noticeable that their housekeepers and servants are black, and notably, they all seem to act kind of strange, and their foreheads are all covered up. That last part is relevant, trust me. Chris has a heart-to-heart discussion with Rose's mother, Missy, a hypnotherapist who tells him she can help cure his smoking addiction. Chris talks about his mother's passing when he was only a child, and Missy helps him with her hypnotherapy, which maybe proves to be a little too effective, as it forces him to hallucinate being trapped in a horrifying abyssal location that Missy refers to as the Sunken Place. It turns out the Armitages are hosting an annual get-together with many of their rich friends, and Chris is invited to meet everyone. Though he's met with no outright hostility, a lot of the people there seem all too eager to ask personal questions about race. Amongst these people, he meets a blind ex-art dealer named Jim Hudson who seems interested in his photography skills. After speaking to the various white folks, plus one Asian couple, Chris finally meets Logan, another black man, who once again acts kind of weird. Chris feels like something is wrong, and also thinks Logan looks vaguely familiar, and so decides to take a photograph to send to his friend Rod, a TSA agent. However, as soon as the flash goes off, Logan suddenly breaks down and screams at Chris to get out, before being taken away and calmed down by the other guests. Chris sends the photograph to Rod, who reveals that Logan is in fact Andre, the man kidnapped at the beginning of the movie. While Rod's strange theories of the Armitages keeping sex slaves do not convince Chris, Andre's appearance here, despite being a missing man, and his bizarre behaviour lead him to suspect something is seriously wrong, and that Rose's parents are not trustworthy. As he goes to grab his things to leave, however, he finds a stack of photographs all featuring Rose arm in arm with a different missing black man. He attempts to leave, but realises the Armitages are planning to kidnap him too, and Rose reveals herself to be an accomplice. Ensuring he can't leave, Missy uses her hypnotism technique to knock him out. Waking up tied to a chair in the basement, Chris watches a video of Rose's grandfather explaining the situation. It turns out the Armitages have for some time been working on a method of immortality, and have discovered a way to transfer a person's consciousness into another person's body, allowing them to take control and sending the original consciousness permanently into the Sunken Place. It turns out the Armitage's servants are victims who were forced to become vessels for the elderly members of their family, and now they've begun to auction off new victims to their wealthy friends, with Chris being purchased by the art dealer Jim Hudson, who assures him that he's not a racist, he just really needs Chris's eyesight, as though distancing himself from the others makes what he's doing acceptable. Realising that Missy's hypnotism relies on him hearing the noise of her spoon, Chris stuffs his ears with cotton from the arm of the chair, rendering him immune. Pretending to be unconscious, he attacks Rose's brother when he comes to fetch him for the surgery and tries to make his escape. The various members of the Armitage family try to stop him, but he's just about able to overpower each one. Eventually, Rose and her grandfather, who is inhabiting the body of their groundskeeper Walter, chase him down with a rifle. Before they can get him, Chris remembers the flash of his camera was able to temporarily save Andre, so he takes another photo. Walter is briefly able to gain control of his body, and he shoots Rose and then himself. Chris tries to finish off Rose through strangling her, but finds he still has feelings for her and hesitates. As he does, a police car arrives and Rose tries to feign that she's an innocent white woman being attacked by a scary black man. The owner of the police car, however, turns out to be Chris's friend Rod, who rescues him, but ultimately chastises him for not listening to his advice to not go anywhere near the house. So, just what is it about this story that makes for such an effective anti-racism message? Well, when you look at all the other typical anti-racist Oscar bait, you'll notice a bit of a pattern. First, the hero of the piece has a tendency to be a bit of a generic, vague, liberal white person there to save the day, while the villain is almost always an out-and-out cruel racist. While the white saviour trope nowadays is starting to be accepted as kind of dated, surely having a flat-out racist as the villain isn't a bad thing, right? Well, no it isn't. We all know racists are bad. But Get Out targets a different group. One that isn't seen as so bad, but maybe kind of should be. It doesn't go after the generic racist redneck or hateful extreme white supremacist. Instead, the villains of Get Out are rich liberal white centrists. The types who, while not being aggressively racist, are still absolutely benefiting from racism, and are not doing anything to change that, despite acting as though they care. The Armitages don't seem like racists in the traditional sense. While they may consistently dehumanize black people and profit off of said dehumanization, well, they don't hate black people. In fact, they're more than happy to sing their praises. But of course, this is mostly just performative. It's their way of trying to deflect guilt and criticism. The Armitages very much represent rich white Americans who like to act liberal and progressive in a social sense, but in reality, the status quo is still rigged in their favour, and they don't want to acknowledge or change that. While their exploitation of black people may be fantastical, it does still carry a lot of real-world messages. Their rural country manor with all black servants does give off the impression of a slave plantation, especially given they're literally holding auctions for mined slaves. It does raise the uncomfortable truth that a lot of rich white American families' wealth can be traced back to slavery and plantations. On top of that, it kind of does make sense that they mostly kidnap black folks, since outside of their racial fetishization, the sad truth is missing white persons, particularly white women, tend to get far more attention, and so they are going for the safer option, as horrible as that sounds. And then there's Rose. Remember that recent viral video of a white woman threatening to call the police, claiming she was being attacked by a black man simply because he asked her to put a leash on her dog, and then afterwards insisted she isn't a racist? Well, let's just say Rose is clearly a commentary on that sort of person. The type of person who will certainly call out racism, but will also very much take advantage of racial injustice, provided it allows her to get her own way. And speaking of viral videos, it's interesting to note that Chris's best weapon against the Armitages is effectively his camera. a clever take on how often the best weapon against enforcers of racism is by exposing them through camera and video footage. It is easy to vilify the out-and-out loud, angry racists of society. I mean, yeah, they are bad people, but they're also a very easy target, let's be honest. Get Out picks a target far more likely to make its audience uncomfortable. I'm sure most of us like to think of ourselves as being not racist, or at the very least, not intentionally bigoted, so watching an out-and-out racist is easy, because, well, we're not like that. They're clearly in the wrong. But Get Out points out that, well, just because you don't outright hate other races doesn't mean you can't still benefit from racism, and the truth is, you can still dehumanize people without hating them. Even before they're revealed to be running a weird immortality cult, there's no denying that the Armitages' attempts to prove themselves as inclusive often come across as very condescending. A lot of audience members asked if Rose was in fact a victim of her family's hypnotism too, and if she was only evil because she was forced into it, and in reality she was a nice, sweet, innocent little white girl. To which director Jordan Peele and actress Alison Williams responded, "No, Rose is just as evil as the rest of them." See, while most anti-racism films usually have at least one token good white person, the truth is, there are just flat out no decent white people in this movie. And you know what? As a white person myself, I'm fine with that. I don't need a white saviour security blanket to shield me from the reality that racism from white people against black people is a sadly common atrocity. And the unfortunate truth is, a lot of white people do benefit from societal racism, and that is very much a bad thing. It's a tough pill to swallow, but we shouldn't need it to be sugar-coated. Overall, Get Out is honestly one of the best horror movies of the 2010s in my opinion. I could go into how it excels in other fields, like the consistent and excellent foreshadowing, like the victims of the Armitages constantly hiding their foreheads to cover up surgical scars, and I could go into how enjoyable a lot of the comedy can be, like Rod's bizarre quest to uncover the Armitage's secrets, while for no clear reason insisting that sex slaves must somehow be involved. But I think we'd be here all day. Without a doubt, it's absolutely a movie to bring up when discussing modern horror. While it wasn't the first horror film to try out a deep societal message, it's become one of the most well-known and well-loved, and for good reason. It's a great movie with a strong message, a good cast, and quite frankly, it makes a fine secret sequel to Being John Malkovich. Ultimately, what more can you ask for? Thanks for watching the video. If you haven't seen this movie, I do highly recommend this. And if you have seen this movie, what did you think? Did you like it as much as I did, or did you think it was overrated? Whatever your opinions, let me know down below. Like, share and subscribe, and donate to me on Patreon if you can. Hope you're all doing well, and I'll speak to you again soon. Goodbye!